What was the best you have no power here moment you have ever seen? I have one that crosses with I don't work here lady a bit. I have a job, but I will still do interviews every couple years. This means the script is flipped a bit. They have to convince me to work there. Anyway, I got the town early, so I stopped at a bakery to get something to eat. The woman went in the back to get it, and this squat toad of a woman walks in, yells at me to get her order, and then yells at me again for not getting up right away to serve her. When I point out that I do not in fact work there, she goes off me about how important she is etc. We can skip the play-by-play. I go the interview. Head of it, and the toad woman walks in. She has this evil grin on her face. I stop everything. I point at the toad woman and I say something like, I have seen how your management treats people and I have no interest in working for you, and I take my resume out his hands and walk out. The look on her face was priceless. Oh, and he had walked in with a print of a resume, so I took his copy. Felt great to do. Edit, and gold? Thanks kind stranger. Edit 2, reward overload. Thank you all so much. My parents were yelling at me, and then my grandpa walks over and tells them both to sit the frick down. They both shut the frick up and sit their ass down on the couch. It was by far the most powerful thing I've ever seen him do. LMAO. Had an old boss who was a complete and total bastard. He was actually my boss and wasn't supposed to interact with us unless it was through our boss, but he just loved trying to make everyone under him squirm. The company had forced him to go to training twice because of how he spoke to people. One day, I get a call at home from him, and he just starts unloading cursing, name calling, insulting over some technical issue he just found out about. After a couple of minutes, I just looked at my phone and hung up on him. The next day, I get called into a meeting with his boss, who basically wants to know who the frick I think I'm hanging up on this guy. I calmly explain that no one gets to yell at me on my time, in my home, on my phone. You have to wait for me to be on the clock to pay me for that privilege, and I'll gladly take that money if I'm busy being yelled at. I'm not busy with anything else. Seemed to work. Edit. Holy heck. The upvotes and awards. Thanks everyone. I'm going to tell everyone who still cracks jokes about that asshole about all the Reddit love. I had a rough childhood with a drug addict father. My mom struggled to make ends meet, and my first job was paying for the mortgage. After several months of working, again at my first job, I finally had some money to spend on myself, and decided to get a computer and a decent internet connection. At the time, the best internet I could buy as part of a dish combo package. I bought a dish and brought it home to install on the house. During this time my dad was still living at home with us, but he was hardly there, and my parents had all but separated at that point. My dad promptly asked me what I was doing, putting a dish on his house. I'll let him know that I pay the mortgage now, and I make the decisions on what we do with the house. I was young, but it was a very empowering moment for me. Edit. I didn't expect to see all this when I checked Reddit again. I'll try to answer questions and things below. I like the jokes. Probably a coping mechanism lol. Edit 2. I see a lot of people talking about the deed and wanted to say something about that. I'm not sure which of my parents' names were on the deed, but what I did know is that if I didn't pay it, it was going to foreclosure. We already had warnings, and it wasn't the first time that had happened. I was young when this all happened, and probably didn't even know what a deed or title was at that time. If I stopped paying, we no longer had a house. A constant argument from parents to their kids is that they pay for the roof over your head, so you'll do what they tell you. They rarely say I own the deed, you do what I tell you. I already posted one more short one. I was about 12 years old, maybe younger. Often had been forced to stay with my mom's friends when she'd go out of town. The father was an abusive prick. He'd do things like make tomatoes every night for dinner knowing I absolutely hated them. For a week. Threw me in a pool when I was small, and he knew I couldn't swim. Classic 70s macho man. He literally tortured me every chance he'd get. As an aside, if you're a kid and your own mother doesn't give a crap how people treat you, it's pretty much open season. Anyway, we went out to dinner one night. Me, my mom, her friends and their kids. We were leaving the restaurant. I don't remember what preceded it, but he said, "Go ahead, tough guy. Hit me as hard as you can," right in the gut, thinking I wouldn't do it because I was scared of him. But this was my moment and I knew it. He was a small man, 5 feet 6 inches. I was at least as tall as him already. And as he gave me his crap-eating grin, I pulled my fist back and fricking belted him in the gut with every ounce of strength I could muster. He immediately doubled over. He was fucking pissed. He tried to turn it around on me, but his wife shut him up instantly. "You told him to do it. If you weren't ready, it's your fault, not his." One of the most satisfying moments of my life. And one of the last times I had to endure Mr. Tough Guy. 15 years ago, I worked for a company in Germany that was bought by a large US company. One of the first actions was a mandatory hours meeting. They used their US PowerPoint deck and guided us through the rules and regulations, although directed by our local hour team to not do that. Here are some of the highlights. We are not allowed to accept tickets for the Super Bowl. Utterly confusion. 90% of the people had never heard of the Super Bowl. A discussion about why we would want to watch that anyways started. We are not allowed to have relationship with anybody from a supplier or within the company. Uproar in the room. This is against the German constitution. What you do in your free time is none of their business. The discussion gets heated. Everybody is discussing. The Americans on the line are very confused why. The head of CA finally gets up and shouts, "If I love that woman, nobody will prevent me from dating her." People signed the sheet that they participated and read and understood the presentation with reservations. People start discussing where to sign up for legal expenses insurance. Bowers refrained from that day from having mandatory global hour meetings. Management tried a couple of other stuff. At will employment, against the law. Everybody has a contract. Cutting vacation, against the law. Canceling bank holidays, against the law. Make people work on vacation days. Guess what? Against the law. And a couple more. It was a prime example of cultural ignorance and incredible funny. Edit. Wow. Thank you for the awards and votes. Exclamation mark dash. New CEO came to our department on the first day of his work. He didn't have a pass card, yet and a lower level employee told him that he can't enter without pass card. CEO got upset and ordered a worker to let him in, but the worker insisted, "Show me the pass card or you're not entering." Few days later this worker got a bonus. I work at a hotel. It's high-end, so we often take the approach of just appeasing guests no matter what, so I frequently have to bite my tongue. However, we have a very desirable parking lot, and when people poach it we boot them. I love enforcing these, because I don't have to bite my tongue or apologize, as they aren't guests. My favorite one was this. Girl parks and walks to neighbor hotel. Our GM happens to be in the lot and says, "Hey, just FYI, this is parking for X hotel, not Z hotel." She proceeds to say "frick you," flips him off, and walks into neighbor hotel. GM calls me and tells me. I giggle, grab the boot and slap it on her car. She comes back screaming and ranting. I tell her the cost is $200. She calls the police. The police ask, "Is this a private lot?" "Yes." "Okay, then pay them." She refuses to pay and storms off. I get a call requesting the manager. I speak with them. It's the girl's mom. She is trying to say, "Oh, my daughter didn't know. She was for a job interview, yada yada." I'll let her go on, and when she finally stops making excuses, I tell her that her daughter flipped off the GM, and there is no way the boot is coming off without payment. On top of that, I tell her when she pays she better not come in swearing or yelling, or the price goes up to $300. She hangs up. The daughter comes back and silently hands me $200 with a look of rage on her face. I've never been so internally jiggly before. A few years ago I interviewed for a job in the US that was labeled as a senior level position, which is my level of experience in this field. I go through 2 phone interviews and a stellar in-person interview. Shortly after the in-person interview, they call me and say they absolutely love me and that I would be a great fit at the company. However, they thought I was a little too green, implying I was inexperienced for the senior level position, but lucky for me, they have an opening for the junior level position at a salary decrease. I kindly told them that the reason I applied to their job posting in the first place was because it was a senior level position and that I wasn't going to take a step backwards in my career by taking a junior level position since I had both the appropriate experience and the work history. I also let them know that trying to trick someone with senior level experience into taking a junior level position by stringing them along through interviews and a job offer was deceptive and unethical. There was silence over the phone for a moment, and then the interviewer said in an offended tone, "Well, we've all had to make sacrifices for company name." To which I replied, "You may have had to, but I don't make sacrifices for anyone." Stunned silence. Then the interviewer, who was so appalled that they didn't know what to say, replies, "Well, maybe you can think about it, and I'll call you tomorrow to check in." I said, "No thank you, and please don't call me," and hung up the phone. They do this a lot to young females like myself in a variety of industries. Don't take crap from anybody. Know your qualifications, believe in them, and tell abusers to frick right off. Your talents will be appreciated and paid for elsewhere, I promise you. New director. Decides admin should hold a meeting at noon MF in the nurses' lunchroom and bar them from entering during that time. Defines it in a group text as a quick win. My response: please help me to understand how this is beneficial to remove the nurses from their lunchroom during lunch break. No response. His peers and higher ups in on the text. He is then moved to the quality department. Screwed up in so many levels. When my crafty father kicked me out of the house and then demanded he have access to my bank to control my financial situation, and I got to tell him, "You have no control over me anymore. You set me free when you kicked me out and now you can't do crap." When an unhappy client threatens to go hire a better lawyer, they don't seem to get that this isn't a threat when they aren't paying me. My dad called me after I moved out to inform me that the lawn was getting pretty long and needed to be mowed, so I asked, "Well, just because you don't live here anymore doesn't mean it's not your responsibility." He said, "Yes it does," I said, and hung up on him. One of my new employees came from a competitor who is, shall we say, not as put together as we are. Her former boss had actually called me to yell at me about poaching his consultants, which, in and of itself, is weird enough. However, a few weeks after she started, the dude rolled up to our office. He had apparently been calling her to get her to finish an analysis for him, and she just ghosted him. I went to the lobby to see what the frick he was doing here. He started in on me again, and then she happened to walk by. I didn't fully understand the conversation, but at one point he literally demanded she do this analysis. She just said, "Or what?" and waited a few beats before turning on her heels and walking away. I did the all hand on his back point to the door universal symbol for leave, or a large security man will make you leave. Never heard from him again. I was working as a consultant for a company. There was a bit of a competition between me and this guy. Company starts to have some financial issues, so I leave and start working for a client of this. Shortly after joining, they bring in this guy I was competing with at my old job. He was technically my equal, except now I was employed by the client and he was just a consultant. He was trying to one-up me during meetings, and my boss told him that decisions are made by the company, not the consultants. It felt good. I worked for 8 years servicing communications equipment on site. 5 of those years were as the department manager. When oil was found in our area, we got so busy we could barely even think. Most of my team were pulling 12-plus-hour days 6 days a week, and we were struggling to hire people quick enough. One day, the CEO texted and said he hired an assistant manager for me, which was something I desperately needed. I was dirty as heck from my previous job and swung by the store to pick him up and take him to one of our sites where he would be doing paperwork. The moment he got in the truck, he immediately started talking crap. He started telling me about how everything we were doing is fricked up, and the department manager, my name, was a total moron, and he would have my job within a few months. I just sat and mostly listened. He obviously didn't know crap about my industry, and every time he would say something wrong, I would try to politely correct him, and he'd either backtrack or insist that I was trained wrong. When we got to the site out in the middle of the West Texas desert, he complained about the layer of dust on everything and ordered me to clean up the entire site. When I sat down at my desk, the guy continued to bee my ear off about everything that was wrong and chastised me for sitting down at my desk when he told me to clean up the site. So I called for a taxi, filled out a notice of termination, and handed it to him. He looked absolutely shocked. Then he defiantly protested that only CEO could fire him. I said, "And my name, right?" He sheepishly nodded. So I stuck my hand out for a handshake and introduced myself. I can teach anyone how to service equipment, but I don't have a clue how to teach someone to not be an asshole. I taught my 6th grade students about democratic processes, and we ran a simulation. Without fail, every one of my classes tried to impeach me. I used to work at a few subways. Thing is, the owner inherited them when she already had a busy and lucrative career elsewhere. She mainly held onto them to employ immigrant family members, I think. One time, she was in the back when she heard me interact with an angry customer. Afterward, she came out and said, "You know you don't have to take crap like that. I trust you. You can use your judgment and just toss anybody out who talks to you like that." After that I wouldn't take any crap from anybody. Slightest hint of backtalk to your sandwich artist, and you were out on your ass, still hungry. It was so much fun. Let me speak to your manager. No. Get out. I'm going to call and complain. Oh, I'm terrified. Go nuts. But you can't call from in here, because you're trespassing now. The sheer indignance of an entitled customer when you don't bow and scrape before them is really something to behold. I worked at a movie theater and some customers were adamant that a staff member had stolen their wallet after they dropped it. Turns out that these people just couldn't see and found the wallet once they actually looked for it. They got irate with literally everyone, from the mall security to the managers to the staff. Mall security finally said, "Get the frick out," and the customers went, "You can't say that. This isn't your theater, we are customers." Mall security guy promptly said, "This is my mall, and I can do whatever the frick I want." A co-worker friend of mine was flying back from a sales conference in Vegas, and he was able to upgrade to a first class seat. We had this sales VP that was on the same flight. She was the snobby, entitled type with a full-time nanny and giant McMansion in the suburbs, and she generally treated people who worked for her like servants. She sees him in a first class seat as she is making her way to coach and asks him how he got that seat. He used points to upgrade. As people are getting settled in, she makes her way back up to the first class cabin and asks to speak with the lead flight attendant. She tells him that one of her underlings is sitting in first class and that she needs to switch with him since she's higher on the corporate ladder. The guy can't believe what he's hearing, but she won't take no for an answer. Finally he tells her she has to go back to her seat or she will be escorted from the plane. She made a complete ass of herself in front of the whole first class cabin. When I was in high school I worked at Popular Warehouse Club selling computers on the weekends. I was hired by the store manager via a referral of a friend. I loved computers, and they thought I'd make a good salesman. So my job was to stay in the computer department and sell computers, nothing else. Well, one of the shift managers didn't like that and insisted that I needed to go fold clothes for a while. As in, half my damn shift. I told him that the store manager had instructed me never to leave the technology department, but he insisted. This went on for several weeks. The store manager showed up one weekend when both the power trip-in shift manager and I were working. The store manager walks up with the shift manager clothes behind. Store manager slaps a stack of green bar paper, this was a while ago, down onto a shelf and points to some highlighted numbers. He looks at the shift manager and says, "Do you see this? This is our average technology sales numbers for the weeks you are on shift. See this number over here? This is our average technology sales numbers for weeks you are not. At this point, it would be more cost effective for me to simply fire you. What do you think of that solution?" The guy stammers and stutters like a toddler caught bullying another kid on the playground. Fortunately, the dude wasn't fired, but the store manager made it clear that when I was on shift, I was not to leave the technology department unless I was on break or there was a fire in the store. That shift manager never said another word to me. When I was still a child, I saw how abusive my grandparents were to my parents when they used to stay in their house during their early years of marriage. When they were broke, they are forced to accept the abuse and swallow their pride, knowing that they are still indebted to them and had nowhere to go. Once they have enough money to leave my grandparents, they moved to a small rented house. My grandparents came for an unannounced visit and berate my dad for living in such a shanty house and how ungrateful he was for leaving their home. My dad was silent until they start blaming my mother for being a wife that brought bad luck to my dad and how she poisons him into moving to a new home. My dad weren't having any of their bile anymore and kicked them out. They stopped talking until my grandfather was dying of leukemia. My mom was the one who persuaded my dad to see him before he passed. One of my jobs is in a hotel/restaurant/bar. A guest came into the bar after having been refused service at our sister hotel down the road. He was very drunk and had been rude, abusive and threatening to the staff. He insisted we serve him as he was a guest, but we'd already been phoned by our sister hotel so they could let us know what the situation was. We refused, but offered him some water and suggested he go up to his room. He then went on about how he had nearly bought our hotel and that he was practically our boss, so we should serve him or he'd have us fired. We refused. He told us he was a very rich man and would tip us hundreds of pounds if we served him. We refused. He was getting abusive at this point, so we again suggested he have some water and head up to his room. He went on to tell us that his brother was the mayor, so we should serve him. We refused and told him he should go on up to his room yet again. He then said he was going to the pub across the street, but all the pubs/restaurants in our town have a barred from the mall policy. We telephoned the other pubs to inform them of the situation. Many of them got back to us and said they had been offered money, been threatened with losing their jobs, and also told the story of the mayor. All of the pubs stuck to their guns and refused to serve him. Eventually, he came back to the hotel and went to his room. I worked at a grocery store for 5 years, putting up with crazy customers and their awful attitudes. At the end of my tenure, our store was set to be closed, and for the last month the store was sold to a liquidation company, meaning we were no longer under our parent company's umbrella and were no longer concerned with retaining customer loyalty. I got to tell customers no and respond with every bit of sarcasm and disdain to every Karen I encountered for 1 month until the store officially closed. When my manager at McDonald's gets into beef fights with all the aggressive/toxic customers and booting them out the store by calling them all security if they refuse to leave. My job right before my current one. Property manager. The owner was an absolute prick. He was heartless and rude and racist, and I loathed him. I hated every day going into that job, but I needed the money. I was applying daily to my dream company in hopes that eventually I'd be accepted. In the meantime, every time I complained or mentioned something to my supervisor, I was told to shut up and get on with it. He was paying me too much to have opinions. 3 years after, we were a small office and the receptionist and assistant prop managers had quit. I finally got accepted into my dream company and happily put in my 2-week notice. In desperation, he offered me more money, a higher position, better benefits, which were laughable. When I said no, he asked why. I have never felt more gleeful than the moment of when I said I don't know. I'm not paid to have opinions here. That was a year ago, and even now the look on his stupid old face gives me joy to this day. Edit, typo and obligatory. Didn't expect this to blow up, but yeah. I'm petty. What's new? Lol, thanks for the awards. To those who mentioned, this was a very brief summarized version, and yes, he did remember saying it to me. He told me I was being too sensitive and should take more money. I've kept in touch with my awesome supervisor, and in the year since I've left, the position has yet to be filled. Everyone keeps quitting because they can't work with someone like him. So, bahaha. Edit 2. Also, since a few people asked, the new job, a yearish in, is doing great, and still to this day almost cry at the thought that I have benefits that include health insurance and a boss that doesn't call me sweetie in a tone that indicates I can't chew gum and walk at the same time. I worked at a Walmart as a cashier, and the assistant manager there was a Pages. He would insult everybody working there and forced us sometimes to do work above our pay grade. 6 months later me and him got transferred to another Walmart that was just built, and they needed to pick a manager and assistant manager. Some random got manager, but I got assistant manager. I guess all the complaints on the assistant manager basically gave him a demotion. So one day he was ordering the other cashiers around, then I pulled him to the side and told him that if he kept pulling the same crap around, he would be out of here. I haven't heard anything from him since. We had an hour lady who was extremely power hungry. She is walking around with the president of the company who flew in from Japan. She rushes him though the warehouse just spits out, "Oh, these other warehouse guys, we don't have to stop and talk to them." He stops, walks over, and starts talking to me about my last vacation. How buying my house went. You could just see her fuming behind him as we talked for almost 45 minutes. I've had multiple meetings with him. We knew each other really well. I don't think he liked her and drug it out on purpose, but I was thrilled to see her just standing there bored as heck. In my first apartment, my parents came to visit, and I said frick when I hit my head on the open door of the freezer while standing up from grabbing something from the fridge. My mother said, "You can't talk like that in my house," and stopped mid-sentence. When I was working customer service for a restaurant delivery service, not unlike DoorDash, I had a customer send in a complaint about hair in their food. The hair was sitting on top of the food. I checked their account, and they had one order on their account, which is a red flag. I check their phone number and find multiple accounts, each other 1 to 2 orders, all of them complaining about hair in the food. I deny a refund because the customer has actually used the same identical photo for the last order since they ordered the same thing. The customer tries to argue with me, threatened to never use the service again. Typical stuff that they always say. Eventually the customer gives up and ends the call, then immediately tries again. I get the support request, see who it is, then deny the refund again. She ends the call, then tries again. The person behind me gets the call. I tap the person on the shoulder and show them what I pulled up on my screen, and that person denies the refund. The next day she calls back and tries again and is outside of the refund window, so the customer demands to speak to a supervisor. The supervisor bans her from the service for multiple fraudulent refund requests. Thank you for watching the video. Tell us your stories in the comments below. See you tomorrow.